Hi, this is Dr. Evan Lipkus from Doctor in Your House. Now, if you're wondering, what the heck is that music? That is the Flash Gordon music from his movie called The Purple Death. Franz Liszt actually composed a lot of that music. At any rate, it's kind of analogous to what we're having today. And I want to just go over a COVID update and get into some of the issues of treatment, mutations, and what we can do. So let's go ahead and get started. I have no teleprompter. I wish I did, but then this wouldn't be Doctor in Your House because you would know that I was just reading it and it wouldn't be very personal. So let's get started. First, what can we do to improve our ability to conquer this particular disease? And there's no blame here. This is completely new. It's very difficult to mitigate this disease, but I'm going to tell you who we can learn from, and that is Taiwan. Taiwan is a country, used to be a dictatorship, now one of the most ardent democracies, and it has about 25 million people in a very densely populated country. The neat thing, which is great, is that there's only been 451 cases there of COVID-19, and none since April. And 7 people died compared to millions across the world. So they're doing something right, and we need to get on that bandwagon. But I'm afraid, even though I'm going to suggest what they're doing that might be helpful here, I'm afraid that America isn't ready for this. You have to understand that Taiwan probably believes more about the safety and the security of their country than we do. We're more individualistic. We like our rights. We like to preserve our rights. And that can get in the way. There's always this balance between liberty and security. The more security, the less liberty. The more liberty could mean less security. So we have to kind of balance this out. What do I mean? Well, for example, Taiwan fines everybody $30,000 if you don't wear a mask. Now, I get it. People in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, they have about a 0.1% chance of dying from COVID-19. However, these people do bring back the disease to other people who are vulnerable. Obesity, diabetes, cardiopulmonary diseases, people that are older. They're going to be exposed. So this is a problem, and I actually do agree with hefty fines. We're not keeping people from work. We're not keeping people from going outside. There's no lockdown, but at least by everybody wearing masks, we could be a whole lot better off. And this is a problem. You see it all over, more so with younger people and gatherings and parties. And this is a shame. So I think this has to start. Again, more security, less liberty. This is going to encroach a bit on our liberties, but I believe in one state, Utah, they're actually doing this. They're fining people if they don't wear a mask. Social distancing, pretty hard to fine people, but you could. The other thing that they do, I don't think is going to happen in America for a long time, and that is they can trace people in the medical system. Not going from the store to home, but going and getting an MRI, people who are going to the doctor's office, they're registered, and that data can be observed in real time. Same with travel by airplane. All this data can be collected and analyzed, and when you analyze this data, you can do much, much better contact tracing. That is, get to the origins of who are the spreaders and quarantine them. Now, they quarantined about 350,000 people initially, and that made a lot of difference. Sure, that might have been like 2% of the population, but nevertheless, it made a big difference. We can learn from them, and we ought to consult Taiwan and see how we can integrate parts of their system into ours. Our medical system is so disjointed. You have all these silos. What do I mean? You have insurance companies, they do their thing. Doctors bill, they do their thing. And benefit providers have their things. There's nobody on the same page. This could make life a lot easier if we had people on the same page. We weren't following patients around, but we would at least see where they enter the medical system, how they go through it, and tracking based upon the disease that they have. This, and I don't mean like heart disease or strokes or cancer, I mean COVID-19. Again, controversial, I understand. So this is one way that we could possibly improve our outcomes. The other thing I wanted to make a point about is mutations. This virus is mutating. As you may remember, well, I don't remember, I'm not that quite old, and I'm sure you aren't either. In 1918, the flu had its origins. In the spring of 18, there were basically a few cases, they were mild. But once it hit in the fall, there were mutations. The mutation probably led to greater virulence or potency, and 50 to 100 million people died. And there were only about 1.7 billion people during that time. That's a lot of people. They wore masks, they did some with social distancing, sterilization, etc., but it still unfortunately killed a lot of people. Right now, what we're seeing with this virus is the initial virus wasn't really as contagious as it is now. So it hasn't gotten more virulent, but it has gotten more contagious because there's this D614 spike on the virus, and it gives us probably better adherence maybe to the lung and the nasal mucosa, and therefore people can spread the disease more easily. And this is just a survival technique of natural selection. The viruses that don't survive aren't contagious. The ones that are tend to survive and multiply and pass down that gene. So this is a problem. It's a problem because if mutations occur, it makes it harder for vaccines to work. But I will reassure you this. The Pfizer vaccine has a 90% efficacy rate 7 days after the second dose. That's really great. Next year, it might only be 50% because the virus will mutate, just like the flu virus. We will try to keep up and attempt to develop vaccines year after year that account for these mutations. Better yet, prevent the spread of it from animals, because it probably spread in China from bats. In Denmark or Finland, one of the Scandinavian countries, they actually have mink that are spreading it, and they've had to kill almost 15 to 16,000 mink because they're different strains. So this is a worry, but I feel very good about the vaccine, and getting into that a bit, we need to see the data. But remember, in phase 3 trials, they're essentially testing this amongst 30,000 people. So if only, let's say, one person gets a severe side effect, that's acceptable in this population. Considering that maybe one out of 50 people or 1 out of 60 people get the disease, and then if they're older, 5 to 20% of those people dying, a vaccine makes a whole lot of sense. And the more people we vaccinate, the better the herd immunity, meaning that the virus gets blocked out from going from person to person. So we need this. Unfortunately, only 40% of nurses are going to take the vaccine in one poll, and only 60% of doctors are going to take the vaccine. I'm going to take this vaccine. The risk of COVID, to me, is far more dangerous than not taking the vaccine. And I'll put our country first in line as well. The more people that take it, the greater the herd immunity, the less the spread. So I'm a vaccine guy. I've taken it. I take my tetanus shots, my pneumonia vaccines, there's 2 of those, etc. I think these, next to running water, vaccines have probably saved more lives. When I mean running water, fresh running water, vaccines have saved more lives than possibly anything, even antibiotics. So they're very important. There's too many darn myths that are just not true about vaccinations. The chances of a horrible, severe reaction are extremely slim, especially if you've tested 30,000 plus with all these different vaccine trials. Okay, what about treatment though? Even though the number of cases are increasing, and we can learn from Taiwan, the death rate, thank God, is decreasing. Why? Well, there's certain things that we're doing differently, and I'm going to go through them. One drug that just got approved is a monoclonal antibody, and I actually had to write this down because it's really, really hard to say. It's called Bamlanivimab, okay? It ends in an AB, and an AB is an abbreviation for antibody. So monoclonal antibodies, like Regeneron or Lilly's product that I just named, and don't force me to say it again, probably bind viral particles, and although they're not proven to work, it looks like they may prevent more serious disease. And this makes sense. You give a lot of specific antibodies to bind to that virus, it's probable that there will be less virus left over. So I think it's a good idea. The problem is, even though it's an IV infusion for just 1 dose, it's very, very expensive. And Lilly won't have, I think they're going to have about 1 million doses by sometime in December. So it gives us some hope for treating this disease early, especially in people with risk factors or who are 65 or over. So monoclonal antibodies like what the president got might be a very valid treatment. Again, these trials are only phase 2. We will get into phase 3 trials shortly. What about remdesivir? Remdesivir is an antiviral agent. It is efficacious if it's given within the first 10 days. So again, it's important, to give these drugs quickly. However, we shouldn't be giving the drugs to people that are at home in quarantine unless they're having marked changes in symptoms such as shortness of breath, in which case such people should be hospitalized. However, the drug does seem to work when people are on oxygen. So if you're on oxygen, you've got this, remdesivir is a good idea. Is it going to save your life? We don't think so, but it will hasten the recovery rate, and that's a good thing. Now, what about dexamethasone? As opposed to being an antiviral, dexamethasone actually decreases the immunity. Well, isn't that bad? Well, no, because with COVID-19, you get an exaggerated immune response called the cytokine storm. These mediators from immune cells cause an overreaction and subsequent organ failure. So giving this particular drug, especially if somebody is on oxygen or on a ventilator, dexamethasone can help. Well, will remdesivir and dexamethasone work better than either alone? We don't know that. So maybe the best thing to do is if you're on oxygen and in the hospital, get both of the drugs. And that's something that makes sense. Now, is there anything for prevention? And we've already gone over this in a previous video. You can subscribe to my videos. If you're looking at YouTube, the subscribe button is somewhere, usually to the right and above my videos. You can always subscribe and make sure you don't miss any. The previous video went over vitamin D. Vitamin D reduces flare-ups of asthma. It probably reduces colds. Coronaviruses are some of the viruses that cause the common cold, so it may be helpful. Other agents that could be helpful are aspirin. Aspirin actually is used in COVID-19 to prevent clotting. This is a very bad problem with this disease. And actually, the University of Maryland School of Medicine performed a trial on 412 patients. All of them, I believe, half of them got aspirin a day before or a few days before they ended up having COVID-19. Interestingly, the 50% that were on aspirin had a much decreased likelihood of being on a ventilator, having to go to the ICU, or dying. Now, is this absolutely proven? No, but it makes sense. Now, I don't want everybody going on aspirin because, as we now know, we used to think aspirin would prevent cardiac disease and strokes if someone never had that. And now it's more of a controversial issue. Like, for example, people over 70, it actually causes more bleeding than actually good. So maybe a better strategy is if you get this particular disease to go on the aspirin, and it may help to prevent further harm. It would make sense. Okay, so that kind of gives you an overview. And of course, as I usually do, this part is ad lib. Of course, the whole gosh darn thing is ad lib. But I'm going to call my dog Mai Tai. So, because Mai Tai has something to say about this terrible disease. Mai Tai, come here, buddy. Hey, hi, sweetie. No, I know you're camera shy, but we're going to get you up here. Okay, so what I want to say, hi, give me a kiss. Good. Okay, so what I want to say is that dogs probably do not transmit this disease. We might be able to give it to dogs, but dogs and cats probably do not transmit this disease. Do you see a resemblance, by the way? Anyway, I think he's getting restless. He's got ADD. Okay, Mai Tai, say goodbye. All right. Anyway, what I was going to say is they're doing some experiments right now in airports, and that gets me to another subject. So let me just get on that subject, and then I'll tell you about the experiment in airports. A lot of people ask me, is it worthwhile to fly? And I'm going to tell you that once the pandemic got into full blast, there really have only been 42 cases of people actually contracting COVID-19 on a plane. So I know there's less people traveling, but that's still very, very few people. It's only 0.3% on one of these fast trains in China. So fortunately, the rate of infection is low. Why is that? Well, each section or each row of an airplane has vents from above, and they're circulating air downward, not this way, but down. And then there's vents on the floor. And half of the air is circulating through HEPA filters, which might help to filter out bad bacteria and viruses. They're used in operating rooms. And the other half is fresh air, which is good, because there's less chance of getting COVID when you're outside. So I think that planes are relatively safe if you take the precautions. Wear a mask, try not to eat on the plane. As soon as you drink some water, put your mask back on. Don't go to the bathroom for every little thing. And the barrier of the seat will be helpful. Wipe down, the areas. And I think that, generally airplanes are pretty darn safe. If you don't have to travel, don't. But if you just got to get out and you're going crazy, stir crazy, or you need to visit, you always get interruptions. If you need to visit relatives, then so be it. Now, one last thing, my time. In airports, there are dogs that are actually sniffing out this particular virus. How so? They actually take a Q-tip and they swab the neck, and then they put it in, and they put it on a piece of paper. I'm sure it's more than just paper. And the dog hey, cut it out. And the dog actually goes into a silent-proof booth and smells it. And they can actually sniff out, my tie, come here. They can actually sniff out the smell of COVID-19. They do it with diabetes. They can do it with possibly cancer. It's amazing. I mean, their sense of smell is 6,000 times greater than ours. So if you can train dogs at airports, not a bad idea. So that's the way I'm going to end it. My dog stopped barking. Thank you so much for joining me in Doctor in Your House. I will keep you up to date on COVID-19, and I hope eventually I can go on to some other topics that are unfortunately being ignored during this pandemic. Get your vaccines. Get out and get your vaccines. That's the take-home message. Not just, the COVID-19 when it comes out, but get your other vaccines and make sure your kids get vaccinated, because there is a 50% reduction in pediatric vaccinations. This is really, really important. We don't need to have measles, mumps, chickenpox, all these other ailments to compound the flu and COVID. Thanks again. Be safe. Bye-bye.